Last October, I decided to go solo camping in the remote sections of Pine Ridge National Forest. I'd been there before with friends, but this time I wanted complete solitude, complete silence. I chose a spot nearly 5 miles from the nearest trail marker, deep enough that I wouldn't see another soul for days. As I set up my tent that first evening, the forest felt peaceful, almost too peaceful. The first night passed without incident. I fell asleep to the usual forest sounds: owls hooting, branches creaking in the wind, the distant rustle of small animals moving through the underbrush. But around 2 in the morning, I woke up to something different. It was still completely dark outside my tent, but something had changed. The forest had gone completely silent. I lay there listening, trying to figure out what had woken me up. The silence was so complete it was almost deafening. No insects, no wind, nothing. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling my campsite. But they were strange. Too heavy to be human, yet too rhythmic to be an animal. They would stop for long periods, then continue in a different direction. I grabbed my flashlight but didn't turn it on yet. The footsteps were getting closer, and I could hear something else now. A low, rhythmic breathing that didn't sound quite right. It was too deep, too controlled. I pressed my ear against the tent wall, trying to pinpoint where the sounds were coming from, when suddenly everything stopped. Complete silence again. I waited for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Nothing. No sounds. No movement. I convinced myself it was just a large deer or maybe a bear that had wandered through and moved on. I was about to try going back to sleep when I heard something that made my blood run cold. A voice, whispering my name. The voice was barely audible, but it was definitely saying my name. Over and over, in a sing-song whisper that seemed to come from different directions. I hadn't told anyone exactly where I was camping. I hadn't even finalized my plans until the last minute. There was no way anyone should know where I was, let alone my name. But there it was. David. 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 I didn't wait for sunrise. I packed everything as quietly as possible and started hiking out by flashlight. The whispering had stopped, but I could feel something watching me as it broke down my campsite. Every time I turned around, I expected to see eyes reflecting in my flashlight beam, but there was nothing. Just that oppressive feeling of being observed by something that shouldn't be there. I made it back to my car just as the sun was coming up, exhausted and shaken. Part of me felt ridiculous for leaving so abruptly. In the daylight, it seemed like I'd overreacted to some woodland sounds and my own imagination. I almost convinced myself that's all it was, until I got home and developed the photos from my trip. That's when I saw something that still gives me nightmares. In one of the photos I'd taken of my campsite the first evening, there was a figure standing between the trees in the background. It was dark and blurry, but definitely human-shaped. But what disturbed me most wasn't just that someone had been watching me. It was that the figure appeared to be wearing my clothes. The same jacket, the same hat I had packed but hadn't put on yet. I studied that photo for hours, trying to find some explanation. Maybe it was just shadows playing tricks, or a reflection in the camera lens. But the more I looked, the clearer it became. Someone or something had been watching me from the moment I arrived. It had somehow accessed my gear, or was mimicking my appearance. The whispering of my name suddenly made terrifying sense. That's when I started researching Pine Ridge National Forest online. What I found made me realize how lucky I was to leave when I did. Over the past 5 years, 7 solo campers had gone missing in that same general area. All of them had been experienced outdoors people. All of them had vanished without a trace, leaving behind their campsites exactly as they'd set them up. The most recent disappearance had been just 3 weeks before my trip. A 28-year-old man named Marcus Chen, an experienced hiker who had been camping solo in the same area where I'd set up. His campsite was found completely intact, with his food still cooking over the fire and his sleeping bag laid out as if he'd just stepped away. He'd never returned to his car. I contacted the Forest Service to report what I'd experienced and share the photograph. The ranger I spoke to was polite but dismissive. He suggested I'd probably encountered another camper and that the photo was just a case of mistaken identity. But his tone changed when I mentioned the specific area where I'd been camping. He became very quiet and asked me to email him the photo immediately. I never heard back from that ranger, despite leaving several follow-up messages. But 3 days later, I started getting strange phone calls. Always late at night, always from blocked numbers. When I answered, there would be nothing but breathing on the other end. And sometimes, very faintly, that same whispered voice saying my name. The calls came every night for 2 weeks, then suddenly stopped. I haven't been camping since that night, and I don't think I ever will again. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I can hear that whispering voice calling my name from outside my bedroom window. I keep that photograph in my desk drawer now, but I can't bring myself to look at it anymore, because lately I've started to notice that the figure in the photo looks more like me than I remember.